Hello and welcome to the Small Business Financing Programs Regulations Workshop. My name is Jonathan Verhoof. I'm a program specialist here with CAEATFA. Today we'll be presenting our proposed program structure and regulations, and we welcome your input and feedback during this workshop. Right now everyone is on mute. If you would like to speak, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you, or alternatively you can type your question into the Q&A text box. We will also have question periods at intervals throughout, with time for more at the end. This deck is available for your reference. We're not walking through every slide, and we just recently sent out an email with an updated deck that has a few changes that we've made since yesterday. So yeah, if you don't see it in your inbox, go ahead and check your spam or junk file. Closed captioning is available at the following URL. Just enter the meeting number and password when prompted. This is the agenda for today's workshop. We'll be starting with an executive summary, which contains a timeline, overview of the program with highlights and changes since our last workshop. Then we'll move on to background on the authority, as well as our programs and our role in the industry. And then we'll take a more detailed look at program structure, including key concepts, contractor and project developer eligibility and roles, project and measure eligibility, the credit enhancement structure, finance companies and financial product eligibility, customer eligibility, and lastly, enabling a secondary market. Then we'll have an illustration on the project life cycle and open up for some more Q&A. The goals of the workshop today are to gain program insight and have an opportunity for you all to provide us with feedback. So we want to provide program details to all the different stakeholders, including finance companies, contractors, implementers, small business advocates, and other industry participants. And we also want to communicate our program development status and give people an idea of the time frame towards launch. And we would like to seek feedback on our regulatory language and also outline the participation process for future stakeholders. And with that, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Miriam.
Good morning. This is Miriam Jaffe-Block with the California Hub for Energy Efficiency Financing. I'm the program manager. And I'm going to go into a brief kind of executive summary of our program today. First, starting with a timeline. CAEATFA has been working on the small business program design for a while. And many of you attended a workshop that we held in April of this year, where we explained that we redesigned the program after a California Public Utility Commission decision in 2017 gave us a lot more flexibility. So after that April workshop, which a lot of you attended, our staff talked to about 50 different stakeholders to solicit feedback. And we've taken all of that feedback into account with the regulation text that we are presenting today. Following this workshop, we're going to take more feedback. And then we're going to utilize the emergency rulemaking process to have regulations take effect in December. This means that in December, the program will be open to enroll finance companies, contractors, and project developers. We expect a few months of operational setup with the finance companies, and then we expect financing to be available to customers about March of 2019. We're eager to take your comments either at this workshop or following by email. We'd like to get your comments by October 19th because we are trying to get the regulations enacted by the end of the year. You can send us an email at what the addresses you see on the screen, or if you prefer to give us feedback by phone, you can email us and set up a call with us. All right, so I want to just reassure people a little bit about the regulation text that if you've looked at it, you've noticed that it's 50 pages. And I want to reassure you that the length of the regs does not mean that the text itself is burdensome for participants. In fact, we have worked to build in a fair amount of flexibility around the role, around different roles in the program, around project eligibility and around who can supply us data. Some of crafting that flexibility actually takes up space to do so. And for those that are, okay, yeah, sorry. And if you're looking at the regs, you'll see that about the last several pages is actually a list of eligible savings measures. Okay, for those of you who are familiar with the program design that we rolled out in April, then what this slide is going to do is going to summarize the most significant changes that we've made. So for instance, we now have a project developer role, which we think is going to be of interest to folks here. We now have created a self-install option for certain measures. We've changed how we do the credit enhancement. We've allowed financing up to 5 million, and we've streamlined some of the size requirements. And we will talk through all of these in detail as we go through the deck. This slide gives you an overview of the program. The basics that we're talking about here is attracting private capital through the use of a credit enhancement. The program will be open to businesses and nonprofits, building tenants and owners in the IOU service areas. If you can hold, let me just get through the introduction, and then we have a few places where we're going to pause. So for folks on the, we've got about 50 people on the webinar, and we've got about 7 or 8 attendees here in the room. So sometimes those of you on the webinar might hear us chatting with folks in the room who are attending live. So the concept here is that a small amount of ratepayer dollars can be leveraged so that finance companies can offer more attractive terms than they otherwise would, or approve a broader range of applicants. And this allows contractors to sell deeper projects and deeper retrofits, and then the state of California gets more energy savings. That's the theory of this financing pilot. With the addition of our project developer role, we believe our program is a great fit for utility program implementers. We want the financing offered by the private capital providers through our program to be something that you can integrate into your programs to help your customers get their projects done as a complementary option to OBF. This would provide deal flow to the finance companies and higher uptake rates for the implementers. We think it's win-win, but we also want to know what you think. All of the CHEEF pilots are part of a statewide marketing plan that includes a new customer-facing website, gogreenfinancing.com. It includes social media campaigns and utility marketing campaigns. What we show here are some of the images from marketing related to our residential program, also known as REAL. The next section of the deck is we have several background slides on the program. I'm actually not going to go through these in detail because a lot of you have heard this before and are familiar with the CHEEF, but they are there for your reference. This is the policy background. This is the legislative action that has gotten us to where we are. This is information about the players behind the CHEEF. I will stop here and talk a little bit about our residential program, because this has been running in the background while we have been working to design and build this commercial program. And I want to highlight our growth. We are up to 7 participating lenders, and those lenders have now completed over $4.8 million in private financing for about 285 projects. We had great growth in Q3 of this year, partly due to the success of the Go Green Financing website. You can see stats on our website traffic in more of these background slides. The other thing I wanted to point out is about half of our loans are going to homes that are located in low mod income census tracts. All right, I'm going to skip a few more, but I do want to pause for a moment on one other piece of background, which is how the pilots relate to other existing financing like on-bill financing and commercial PACE. So most people are familiar that the utilities have a revolving loan fund that they run called on-bill financing, or OBF, where small businesses can borrow at 0% interest. And this is a great option for many small businesses. However, we think that there are niches where our financing through the CHEEF is going to complement both OBF and commercial PACE. For example, most utilities still have a $100,000 per meter cap and require a 5-year payback, which means that OBF lends itself really well to lighting projects, but it's hard to do gas measures and it's hard to do expensive HVAC or large pieces of equipment and get that 5-year payback. So we think that's where CHEEF financing is going to play a good role. And on the commercial PACE side, tenant occupants are eligible for our program, but it just doesn't work for being a tenant and doing commercial PACE. All right, and now it's back to Jonathan.
All right, so next I'm going to talk a little bit about the program structure and some of the key concepts here. This slide provides an overview of the financing limits in the program and how the various elements fit in. These slides might seem complex at first, but I think when I walk through, they'll become clear. We're going to be returning to these terms throughout the presentation. So at the top in the gray bar, you can see that the maximum financed amount in a project is $5 million. And of that, in the green area, up to 1 million can receive a credit enhancement. That's what we call the claim eligible financed amount. And that 1 million can be made up of two subcategories. At least 70% of the 1 million that gets the claim credit enhancement needs to be energy saving measures, or ESMs. But also additionally, up to 30% may account for non-energy components. And then the remainder is what we call the claim ineligible financed amount, the measures that don't get the credit enhancement. And the next slide has more detail on this. So in this slide, you can see under the claim eligible financed amount, the 70%, which captures energy saving measures, on the lower left there, you can see that they're broken out into three subcategories. Those are the three ways that measures can qualify. And measures can qualify by any or all of these three ways. They can come from our pre-qualified ESM list. They can be approved for a utility customer program, or they can be certified by a professional engineer or a certified energy manager. And in addition to that, measures that are legally and practically required to complete the installation are also included in as energy saving measures. So if you need permits, if you have to repair the drywall and paint after putting in an HVAC system, that counts as energy saving measures. Then up to 30% can be non-energy components. And this can be pretty much whatever the customer wants, except for it cannot be distributed generation. So some examples include you can put in some landscaping, new floors, you can put in a new patio, you can have a wheelchair ramp. Then of the claim ineligible financed amount, as I said, distributed generation cannot get credit enhanced. So that includes solar PV, combined heat and power, and storage. And then also additional energy saving measures along the allowable 1 million, or non-energy components beyond the allowable 30%. The way that our rules are structured is around the amount of financing. So 350,000 and below has fewer customer underwriting requirements, and projects can qualify automatically if measures are on the CAEATFA's broad pre-approved list, as I mentioned in the previous slide. And for projects above 350,000, there are stricter customer underwriting requirements, and these projects will require either an energy professional, which is those classifications I just mentioned, the professional engineer or the certified energy manager. They will certify the savings on these projects, or it can also qualify via a utility custom incentive approval. An exception to this is lighting projects. For lighting measures that are on our pre-approved list, they don't need that certification. You can go all the way up to 1 million with those. All right, and next I'm going to hand that off to my colleague, David.
Good morning, everybody. My name is David Gibbs, and I'm an analyst here at CAEATFA working on the development of the Small Business Energy Efficiency Program. First, a quick housekeeping note. On this slide and throughout the presentation today, you'll see a little red text box in the upper right-hand corner of some slides. This box identifies what section within our proposed regulations each slide is addressing. You can use this information to follow along with us today and for your future reference. Okay, now one of the exciting changes we've made involves the addition of the project developer role to the small business program. We heard from you after our prior workshops that within the commercial space, business owners are often skeptical when they hear that energy efficiency upgrades can save them money, leading to an improved bottom line, and that they're also busy running their businesses and just don't have time to interact with and learn a program. And we also heard that contractors are often too busy or have minimal desire to spend time interacting with the program. This project developer role is intended to address these issues, and it's ideal for small and green business advocates and chambers of commerce who are trusted within the small business community, and program implementers who are designing and running energy efficiency programs on behalf of the IOUs, RENs, and CCAs. These organizations have already gained the trust of the business community and can help them see how energy efficiency savings can save them money and do right by the environment at the same time. We also think this role will work for those project developer companies who are looking to fill a niche in this burgeoning field. Ultimately, we see this project developer as someone who will help guide customers and contractors through our program and interact with our new web-based interface. Hold your comments just for a couple more minutes, and we're going to open the floor up here in about 2 minutes. There is some overlap between the types of things that a project developer and a contractor can do. As you can see, both can develop a scope of work for the customer and come up with a plan for achieving energy savings. They can provide a bill impact estimate to the customer and interact with, our web-based interface to input customer, project, and measured data. Alternatively, there are some clear differences between what the project developer and contractor can do. This slide describes what state law requires of a contractor, namely a license, and some additional requirements that CAEATFA has put in place. The licensing requirement is a big differentiator between the project developer and contractor roles. These contractor requirements will look familiar to those of you who are aware of our residential program. As you can see, only a contractor can install and certify measures, certify that work was completed according to code, and that all permits were pulled and finalized. By comparison, because a project developer has no license, we're asking them to provide us with demonstrated experience in this role. We're trying to strike the right balance in making the program role as streamlined as possible while providing an adequate level of consumer protection. To that end, we're asking for your input now into our proposed project developer requirements, specifically whether requiring project developers to have completed 25 projects as a project developer is the right threshold. Should this number be higher or lower? Is it just right, and why? Are there any qualifications that we're missing that should be considered? And should we allow utility program implementers to automatically qualify for enrollment regardless of the 25 project minimum threshold? And with that, we'd now like to open the floor to you to get any feedback you can provide regarding this new role and the questions you see on your screen. You can type feedback to us or answers to the questions by clicking the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. Or if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand electronically and we'll unmute you. And obviously for those of you who are here with us today, just raise your hand and we'll be happy to field your questions. And I'm going to start with Jacqueline Reynoso, who has raised her hand. And Ms. Reynoso, we're in the process of unmuting you now. And
if folks, before they ask their question or give their comment, can just give their organizational identification, name and organizational identification, please.
And Ms. Reynoso, I think that you are unmuted. Please begin.
Does she need to unmute herself?
Yeah, you might need to unmute yourself on your computer if you are muted.
Okay, well, while we're working on that, let's take a couple questions in the room and we'll repeat these. So I think we actually had, is yours in response to what we just pointed out, or is it something?
It goes back over.
Okay, so let's start with what we just pointed out and then we'll work our way back. Okay, so why don't we start with you?
My name is Michael Day. I'm with Train Ingersoll Rand. One of the things on your project developer here is if you're looking at certified energy managers by definition need to file, in order to be granted that certification, experience in the industry and performing this. So you may wish to have anyone who holds a CEM that's been through the registration process automatic, simply because they've already been peer reviewed in addition to passing an examination. and it includes their experience.
I like that idea.
So I'm just going to repeat the feedback just in case folks couldn't hear it, but thank you for projecting. So the feedback was to consider allowing anyone with a CEM, Certified Energy Manager credential, in as a project developer, since they've already been peer reviewed and through a fairly rigorous process. How are we doing with the woman who, was it Miss Reynosa?
Was Miss Reynosa her microphone?
Yeah, Jacqueline, Ms. Reynoso, we don't see you. For some reason, we weren't able to field your question live. If you
So she's typed it in.
She's typed it in the Q&A.
Great,
section.
and so I'll go ahead and read that to everybody. My speaker on my computer is not working, but my phone line is. My question is, if your utility program implementers will also be subject to training by CAEATFA? And I think the answer to that is yes. We want everybody who's going to be enrolling as either a project developer or a contractor to go through our training. We're designing the training so that it's not going to be too burdensome or time consuming for you. It'll likely be interactive, and you can do it from the comfort of your office or your home. But yes, we would require them to attend our training.
And just to be clear, that our training here at CAEATFA is really about how to use the program. We do not have training on anything technical. It's just how to interact with the program. All right. Take another one in the room.
Yeah.
My name is Eric Taylor from the California Energy Alliance. I just have a comment. There's a special designation by the California Energy Commission called the Third-Party Quality Control Program, which basically can have relationships with HVAC contractors. In other words, they're unlike a home energy rating company. They provide diagnostic equipment to the HVAC contractor for verification purposes that are uploaded to the California Energy Commission's registry. And I just wanted to point out that that program exists, and I think it would be a perfect match for a certified designator or developer of these projects, because they work with contractors every day.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, David, I think we had one come in that we wanted to answer live.
Yeah, so Jeff Guild asks, is there anything that prevents a licensed contractor from acting as a project developer? And the answer is no. In fact, we understand that there is going to be some overlap and that there are going to be companies out there who do both. However, we do want you to, if you are a licensed contractor and you'd like to enroll as a contractor to perform installations, we would want you to enroll as a contractor. Alternatively, if you're going to be filling the project developer role, we'd want you to enroll as a project developer also. And so you would be one company or one person holding two different enrollments and two different hats within our program. Great question.
All right, I think we had some more folks in the room.
Mike Thompson, California Energy Alliance. Real basic question. You mentioned that the project developer role would be ideal for utility implementers and PCAs. This program is for private business also, right? It's not just for utility associated projects.
Okay, I'm going to repeat the question. So the question is that we mentioned that this program would be ideal for utility implementers, but this is for private business, not just utility associated projects. So by utility associated projects, do you mean those where a customer is seeking a rebate or incentive from the utility?
I don't know. You list here utility implementers and you mentioned non-utility projects. So my question is,
so this program is for, well, I'm not sure exactly what you mean. This program is for small businesses and nonprofits in the private sector who want to undertake energy upgrades. And they may be pursuing a project with using a utility rebate or incentive through a customer deemed program. And that's why we think that having contact with utility program implementers who are out there every day knocking on small business doors and telling them about various programs could make various rebate options could make a lot of sense because the rebate almost never covers the full cost of the equipment, and that's where the financing would come in. However, a participation in our program and access to our financing does not require the use of a utility rebate or incentive. In our residential program, about 80% of our projects, there is no utility rebate or incentive. So the financing and the energy upgrades are happening. They're utility customers, but they're not getting utility rebate or incentive. We think it'll probably be higher in the small business world because we think small businesses aren't out there doing a lot of projects without having some of that incentive, but it's certainly not required.
Todd O'Connor with Clear Result. Related to that question, since the customer does not have to qualify for a IOU energy efficiency rebate to participate in this program, is this program limited only to those customers located in investor-owned utility?
That is correct. We need the customer to be a customer of the utility, which matches the fuel source for the measure that they're putting in. So if you're in PG&E territory and you've got PG&E gas and electric, then you qualify for both gas and electric saving measures.
And that includes the CCAs?
Yes, that's correct.
My second question has to do with how you define nonprofits. Does it include faith-based organizations located in those territories?
Yeah, so the second question was how do we define nonprofits, and does nonprofit include faith-based? And I think the answer is yes. We're actually not being very prescriptive on how we define nonprofits. Okay. We don't even define it in the regs. We're open to feedback on that if folks think that we should, but our intention was to allow faith-based organizations to access the financing. There are a few comments that have come in that are not so much questions, but comments that I thought we might want to read just so that everybody can have access to them.
Sure. Philip Kopp commented, any company who is qualified to support an IOU program should also be qualified to support this program. The only requirement for a vendor to perform utility incentive program work is a certificate of insurance. Thank you, Philip, for your comments. Josephine Fleming commented, you may have CBOs and government organizations that could fulfill the project developer role. The agreements and insurance requirements may be a deterrent for the bureaucratic process involved. Thank you, Josephine. And for comments like that, if what we're really hoping to get from you all in the industry is maybe some insight into what you might be thinking would be a more reasonable amount. So if in addition to your comments, if you have any suggestions, we would gladly take those so that we can help you craft the program to better suit industry's needs. And then from Jessica Johnson, with regards to the project developer participation criteria, will you please provide some clarity on what type of projects need to have been completed to meet the 25 completed projects threshold?
So I think, this is Miriam again, I think this is another area where we have not defined things too rigorously. There are sometimes occasions when one wants to be a little open in the regulations. I think our thought was these should be energy efficiency projects. They should utilize the type of measures that would be available through our program. But we are not requiring that they be a certain type of business or that they have been done with a certain type of utility. I also did want to go back to the comment about CBOs and government organizations fulfilling the project developer criteria. I think we are imagining that there could be some community-based organizations, some nonprofits, or some local government efforts who work with small businesses, and we absolutely would want to encourage them to be in the project developer role. You know, we didn't think the $2 million of liability insurance was overkill, but if there are real barriers, again, we'd want to know specifically which requirements and which agreements might be too much.
And when Randy, if you don't mind, just real quick, Michelle Vegan with Common Spark Consulting asks, if a project needs to be within an IOU CCA territory, can you clarify if this excludes POUs and muni territories?
So we will get a little bit more into that, but I'm actually going to go back to the first slide early slide that Jonathan showed. So if a customer needs to have at least one IOU servicing them in order to participate in the program. If they are in a split territory where they have a utility gas service, but that they have a public utility as their electricity, they can still qualify for the program, but the electric measures would not be considered claim eligible. We would not provide a credit enhancement on the electric measures because I think actually they could be included in the 30%, if I have it correct, but no more than 30% of the claim eligible financing can be the electric measures.
I think that is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you for confirming. So, so there is some way to participate, but that's because these are utility ratepayer funds, so we have to use them mostly for utility ratepayers. We are seeing that in our residential. We are seeing customers in the muni locations in Los Angeles and Sacramento doing projects with some small amount of electric measures that fit into that 30% bucket that we can still provide a credit enhancement on. And I think we've got time for one more question or comment here, and then we need to move on, and we'll continue to open it up as we go. So let's get the gentleman who has not spoken.
So at the Energy Commission, we've been looking at heat pump technology.
Can you just introduce yourself,
I'm
please?
sorry. My name is Robert Ritchell. I'm with the California Energy Commission. And so we've been looking at heat pump technology as a strategy for decarbonization, particularly water heating and space heating. So my question is, what we're saying is that without subsidy, it may not be viable. So if a heat pump on a particular business was not viable without subsidy, then if they were to receive a rebate from the utility, for example, and they could cash flow and show the cost savings at least, would that be something you would consider? I mean, it's not really clear what your underwriting criteria are here.
Okay, so I think we need to repeat that question because it was a little bit soft. So I think the question is, if you have a technology like heat pumps, where there's maybe still some questions around cost effectiveness without subsidy, is it eligible? So we are not applying a cost effective test to measures for financing. This is a big difference between this private financing program and the utilities, on bill financing where they're looking at a certain payback. So I believe in our ESM list, we do have heat pumps on there. Yeah, so that means that if it's a heat pump and it's on that list and a private capital provider is willing to finance it through our program, then we welcome it. There are some private finance companies, some of whom are on the line now, who I know do not underwrite to energy savings because they're asset-based lenders or they're looking at cash flow. And there are others who are offering more complicated products like savings-based payment agreements and energy service agreements where they are really underwriting savings. So I think we're going to have a mix, but the program will allow that technology.
As long as it cash flows.
The program is not, we are not requiring, CAEATFA is not requiring a cash flow analysis based on a particular technology. We have minimum underwriting criteria that we'll get to a little bit later on, and then private capital providers are going to decide if they're willing to make a loan or a lease or a service agreement, and they're going to be looking at other factors like the business's overall cash flow, and they may or may not include the projected energy savings into their underwriting. We've got a lot of different models kind of in the mix here.
Okay, thank you.
And that is, thank you for pointing that out, because that is one major difference between us and some other programs.
So the specific measure, I'll just close, would not necessarily have the cash flow as long as the business, overall cash flow of the business is.
Yeah, so the sort of confirmation is that the specific measure does not need to cash flow as long as the overall business, and this is really on finance provider discretion.
Right.
So we are certainly not looking at any individual measure, and our cash flow requirements are actually fairly liberal as well and left up to the lender, and we'll get there in about 30 slides.
Thank you. Sorry for that.
All right, and now we're going to pick up with our next section.
Oh, Dave, you had
Really quick, everybody. Thank you very much for the comments, both online and in person. And just so you all know, we are recording this webinar. So all of these questions, if you weren't able to kind of get what was answered or hear the question, this will be available for you to refer back to at a later date. As soon as we have that posted, I'm sure we'll reach out to you electronically to let you know.
Okay, so next I would like to talk about project and measure eligibility. As I mentioned previously, energy saving measures can qualify via any of three methods, any or all on any given project. We have the pre-qualified energy saving measure list. That includes any measure that qualifies for a rebate through a utility program, a third-party administered program, or a REN or a CCA. Also, anything that has been approved for a utility custom program can qualify. And the third method, as I mentioned previously, is what we call professionally certified energy saving measures. That is where the professional engineer or certified energy manager signs off on the measures. And I wanted to highlight our definition of energy saving measure as any energy efficiency or demand response measure, including alteration improvements, as I mentioned before, that are legally or practically required to complete the installation of these measures. And for your reference, we've got our definitions of energy efficiency and demand response on the right. Our first method, energy saving measure list, we have a pre-qualified list. On the left of the slide, you can see a number of overall categories into which these measures fit, that we're trying to have a very inclusive small business program. And each of these categories will have subcategories that are broad categories, such as efficient HVAC or lighting controls that will capture, in essence, what the energy saving measure does. So measures that are on the list can be financed without any additional approval for up to $350,000, or in the case of lighting measures, all the way up to $5 million, although only the first $1 million will get the credit enhancement. Some ESM list measures will include additional energy requirements, eligibility requirements, for example, Energy Star or Design Lights Consortium standards. And as I mentioned, there is a IOU, REN, CCA rebate other category. It's a catch-all so that we're allowed to approve measures that have already been approved by utilities and given a rebate, even if it's not listed specifically on the list. And the full draft of this list is available in the appendix of this slide deck. Oh, and the back of the regulations as well. We introduced a self-install measure option after considering impact from different stakeholders that we talked to, because we realized that small business owners may wish to install, for example, an efficient refrigerator or some screw-in lighting, and we really don't want them to have to pay for a contractor for something small and simple like that, which can actually start saving them energy right away. And in addition, non-energy components also qualify for self-install. So if you want to paint your restaurant and add that into the financing, you can do that. So we have set specified measures on the list which are eligible for self-install. So for a few other examples include plug-in appliances or equipment, smart thermostats, or low-flow shower heads. And on these self-install projects, we are requiring a project developer because we need someone who's going to provide us with the program data and certify that the measures were installed. As I mentioned, measures can also qualify for our program via the utility custom incentive programs. So any measure that's already been approved by IOU, REN, or custom program is approved for financing. We just need to see the letter of approval or notice to proceed. And the third method, which we call the professionally certified method, we added this because we've gotten a lot of external feedback that custom processes can take a long time. And sometimes customers will install a less efficient measure rather than wait to get approval for their custom measures. And we wanted to offer a faster process that has more flexibility and customization to the program. So the certified energy manager or professional engineer who is not working for the customer can certify that these measures will save energy, and they'll provide us with an estimate of how much energy they think it's going to save. And we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from the industry on this method. All projects are going to be required to meet basic requirements. We need you to be in compliance with state and local laws and licensing and permitting requirements. I wanted to highlight a few program-specific ones. As we touched on before, we need a fuel source match. So if a customer is getting electricity from a municipal energy provider, such as SMUD, then a lighting measure is not going to qualify as an energy saving measure. We also require a bill impact estimate. You don't have to write your own. We can provide a template for you. And we need contractors and project developers to make certain certifications that the project is completed in compliance with our program requirements. A big part of the effort that we've put into writing these regulations is to give these projects a lot more flexibility. And this slide highlights some of the various ways that we have allowed for that. So you can have only one contractor on the project. You can have more than one. You could have a general managing several contractors, or they could be independent of each other. For example, if you have one contractor who's putting in your HVAC and another one who's doing your windows, they probably don't want to interact with each other, so they can independently interface with our program. Also, you can combine self-installed measures with other qualifying measures so that you can have a contractor install some of the project, but you can install some of it yourself. And we've allowed for a lot of flexibility in terms of non-energy saving components for up to 30% of the claim eligible amount. And these can be installed by the customer through a self-install, through a participating contractor, or through a non-participating contractor. Maybe they don't want to interface with our program at all. And we've also have scalability as a huge goal. We wanted to capture the smallest projects as well as all the way up to those $5 million projects. And if the finance company allows it, these projects can include solar. It depends on working it out with the lender, and they will be able to look at our program and understand what kind of credit enhancement they're going to get on the overall project. We're going to be doing some post-installation verification checks. After the project is done and the financing is enrolled, within a year, CAEATFA will be reviewing the documentation which was submitted to do quality control. And you can see that we're listing some of the documentation here. We're going to be verifying utility service and utility rebates, fuel type match, the breakdown of energy saving measures versus non-energy saving measures, looking at the invoice, and making sure that the project is in compliance with program requirements. And for a smaller portion of the projects, we may perform photo verification or a site visit. All right, I'd like to take another pause here for questions or comments on the things that we've just covered. Go ahead, please.
Hello, this is Michael Day with Train Ingersoll Rand. I actually have two questions. First is, you made a comment that said a professional engineer or CEM not working for the customer. These professionals are not free. They're typically being paid for out of project funds. Could you please clarify what you meant by that and how that's supposed to work?
Thank you. The question was, can you please clarify what the professional engineer or certified energy manager is not working for the customer means? You're being paid by the customer, but you're not an employee of the customer within the customer's organization. We just wanted to assure that there was some measure of distance and third-party verification going on there.
All right.
And I believe that that is clarified in the regulations. I think we used shorthand in this slide deck, so that's good feedback. We should not use that shorthand, but I believe in the regulation text it says the word employee.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. The second question was, it looks as if energy storage writ large is not considered energy efficiency. However, there are types of energy storage, like say thermal energy storage, which if you're running your air conditioner at night can actually reduce the kilowatt hours over the course of the day, over the course of a year, that have energy efficiency and quite certainly can have they're enabling demand response. It's easier to participate turning off your air conditioner if you can get your cooling out of the ice bank or a water tank up on a hill. So with regards to those measures, which are sort of dual use, energy storage, but also our energy efficiency or demand response, do the rules as written exclude them because they're energy storage, or are they in if they are something that promotes KWH or therm efficiency or DR participation?
So I think that is it Mike? No, it's Michael. Michael was pretty loud, so I think that came through. In terms of the in terms of our restrictions around storage, we are subject to the California Public Utility Commission's guidance decision, which really designated this as an energy efficiency program and did not allow storage. Do we have a definition of storage in our regulations?
I don't think we have storage specifically defined in the regs now.
Okay.
DR.
I think we have a DR definition that includes storage. I'm trying to pull up the regulations right now. I think what we'll do on this one is if you have specific measures that you think or technology should be included, if you can follow up and send us an email and kind of make an argument as to why, sure. I think we will look at that with a consultant who we may bring on the line later if we have more time. So we have a Dan Mellinger from Energy Futures Group is our technical consultant around these measures, and we will welcome your comments on that. But what we have found is that so far the Public Utility Commission has really included storage within distributed generation. And so, for instance, combined heat and power is not allowed in this program, and that's already been sort of litigated. So if it's technologies along those lines, I'd say the prospects are slim. If you can make an argument that it's different and it somehow really is true demand response or energy efficiency, we'll take a good look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Todd O'Connor with Clear Result. On a related question, and I appreciate the question, getting to the definition of energy efficiency, and I apologize to those that they hear me cite it, but it's important. In energy using appliance, equipment, control system, or practice whose installation or implementation results in reduced grid supplied energy use while maintaining a comparable or higher level of energy service as perceived by the customer. It seems to me, given that definition, that storage fits, number one. And number two, it also seems that photovoltaic also fits that definition. And also photovoltaic has been identified by the U.S. Department of Energy in a memorandum with Southern California Edison to qualify as an eligible energy efficiency measure. So if it's good enough for the U.S. Department of Energy, I would suggest it's good enough for the program here. And with respect to storage, if you're looking at external attributes, I think that's the important thing. And if any technology, product, or system meets this definition, shouldn't it be included?
So I think, so I appreciate the impassioned arguments here. And I will tell you that CAEATFA does not like having to run programs in silos. We don't think that customers see any of these distinctions when they are looking to install projects. However, we are in a world of funding silos. And our program will not be able to provide a credit enhancement for distributed generation, which is defined and includes photovoltaic. If it's not clear that our energy efficiency definition excludes distributed generation, then perhaps we should make it a little bit more clear in our regulations. But this is a California Public Utility Commission guidance decision for the program. So it can be part of a project. The lender will just not get a credit enhancement for it.
Well, I guess,
and I'm sorry, Todd, we're going to have to move on. This has been litigated. This discussion isn't going to advance beyond photovoltaic is not going to get a credit enhancement.
No, this is something else.
Okay, and then I think we just need to move on.
It's related to, we keep on using the term distributed generation, yet the term of art that's been enhanced over the past 5 to 6 years has been distributed energy resources. So if you're not restricted by CPUC regulation.
We are.
On distributed energy resources, on DER?
I believe we are. I think we can take a closer look at this later. I know we do have a couple of CPUC representatives on this call right now, our analysts there, so it's something we can work on afterwards.
Okay.
I'm a little hesitant to make too many promises about what CAEATFA can and can't look at because we are under that guidance decision. But I appreciate the sentiment and the desire to be as inclusive as possible. And maybe what the finance companies who are on this call can take away is if there's market demand and we're able to credit enhance a certain portion of the project, then maybe they would want to include it anyway, and not have every dollar credit enhanced, but still hear that demand might help generate more deals. So that. To that end, I think we can roll with it. All right, so I think what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the finance side, and we will continue to come back and have pauses for questions. And so if we have time at the end and folks want to continue chatting, we can return to specific measures and more on the project side. And we've got about 70 people online now, so we appreciate all of the comments. Okay, so the getting to the credit enhancement structure, the actual structure has not changed since what we presented in April. The credit enhancement is going to be structured as a loss reserve. CAEATFA is going to set up an account at a trustee bank for each finance company that enrolls in the program. And as your company enrolls loans or leases or service agreements with the program, we will contribute funds to the loss reserve account. And these are these utility ratepayer dollars that we've been talking about and what they're approved for and what they're not. In the case of a default, the finance company can request funds to be paid out of the loss reserve for up to 90% of the claim eligible financed amount. And we will also open up to 3 sub-accounts for each finance company in case you wish to benefit from having funds segregated for different investors and want to keep your pools of loss reserve funds separate. We have changed the structure of the contribution to the credit for the credit enhancement. So we are currently proposing to contribute 20% of the first $50,000 of claim eligible financing and then 5% of the next $950,000. So in the proposed structure that we presented in April, we had 3 tiers of financing with different contribution rates, and that led to some very awkward jumps in the loss reserve contribution. So here we've really smoothed it out. And what this new methodology does is it's gradual, so it's smoothed out. It also provides an incentive for small deals, which are hard to finance. So those finance companies doing those 50,000 and under deals are getting a 20% contribution to help them with that underwriting and burden. And then we've reduced the amount to 5% on the next 950,000 because the finance companies told us that anything over 5% wasn't making too much of a difference at that point. So we might as well preserve the ratepayer funds. Now, in the event of a charge-off, the finance company can submit a claim for up to 90% of the claim eligible charge-off amount. We expect the finance company to take reasonable collection and recovery steps in line with its normal practices. And if the finance company has made a recovery, our payment won't make them more than 100% whole. The finance company can assign the payment to a third party if they've sold off the agreement and there's another investor who needs to be paid. And we're also allowing finance companies to use future contributions to cover charge-offs if they don't have enough in their account at the time of the default. And this would be allowed until the end of the fiscal year. So the details of this, I really encourage the finance companies to read the credit enhancement section in the regulations, which is pretty short, but has all of these details. Now this next slide gets a little bit technical. We are trying in our program to keep up with this changing market for energy efficiency financing and to allow products beyond traditional loans and leases. We think that's also a niche where the CHEEF financing can provide value to small businesses who may want a service agreement or a cash flow positive, what we're calling savings-based payment agreement, because these are product types that you cannot get through OBF. So we need to have, we're trying to have what we call product parity here, where we are treating the different products the same or similar in terms of what is we consider financed and what we consider to be a charge-off. So bear with me while I read these definitions, because this is an area where I'd like some finance company feedback to make sure that we've gotten this right. But the total financed amount for loans and leases is very simple. It's just the original principal that was disclosed to the customer through the loan or lease documentation or job addendum. For a service agreement or a savings-based payment agreement, and we'll get to those product definitions in a moment, this is the total installation amount paid to the participating contractor and disclosed on the job addendum, and it's inclusive of equipment, taxes, labor, and shipping, but it's exclusive of ongoing service and oversight payments. So what we're considering to be financed is that upfront investment to do the install, not the ongoing monthly charge that the customer might pay for maintenance with these agreements. And then when we get to the charge off, it's pretty clear for loans and leases, it's outstanding principal. For the service agreements and the savings-based payment agreements, it's going to be this sort of complex equation. Well, it looks more complex than it is. It's that total initial installation amount divided by the number of months, the term, multiplied by the number of months remaining. So the gist is that we're not going to reimburse a finance company for monthly service charges that were unpaid because the customer defaulted early. We're not considering that to be part of the charge-off. The CPUC guidance decision requires that CAEATFA rebalance loss reserve accounts periodically to be able to revolve the funds for ratepayers, and this slide kind of talks through our methodology to do so. We will take into account any claims from the fiscal year prior to the rebalance so that finance companies can use their loss reserve contribution as portfolio insurance, which is our intention. I'm going to go through another section on the financing and then pause for comments. So I'm going to talk about the company eligibility and roles. So again, we're really trying to be flexible here and accommodate a lot of different business models. And what we see in the commercial world is that there is a huge variance in how the financing is offered. And what we also see is that there are even some ESCOs where the line between is it a contractor or is it a finance provider, you know, what are you? It gets a little blurry. So what we have done is we have nailed down here what the roles are in the program. And so we're starting with marketing representation. This is going to be the entity that gets listed on our program websites and gets advertised in our marketing materials. Then there's an underwriting role to follow program guidelines for approving the financing and the projects. There's an origination role. There's a financing submittal role, which is basically giving us data about the project. Note that CAEATFA doesn't actually get any loan or lease documents. We just get program information. There's a servicing role. There's a monthly reporting role to supply CAEATFA with regular monthly reports on the status of the performance. And then there's a role of being the loss reserve account representative and filing a claim and getting the claim payment and dealing with any investors. So you've seen this slide before from April. We are proposing this flexible strategy where two entities can team up as a primary and affiliate applicant and together decide who's going to perform these roles and even designate a third marketing representative if they want to. This might work well if a finance company is offering a white label product and just wants to allow, you know, its client to be the one who is advertised. Or at least that's our theory, and you can tell us if we are right. All applicants are going to need to meet some key requirements. Most importantly, the finance company is going to need to tell us what are the benefits to the customer from this access to the credit enhancement. At the last workshop, we solicited feedback on additional kind of competency requirements for the finance companies. And what we've laid out here is for financial institutions who are either federally insured depositories, so banks or credit unions or CDFIs. It's kind of like being a licensed contractor. Just by being a federally insured depository or CDFI, they're in the program. That's enough. For the specialty finance companies who do not fit that category, we have some additional requirements that we've now laid out in the regulations to make sure that the companies that are participating in our program are going to be ongoing concerns, that have good customer service, and that have a good reputation of dealing with customers. And so you see those requirements here. We're looking for a net worth of at least $1 billion. for the underwriting, origination, and servicing roles. We're looking for demonstrated experience and competency. For origination, we are looking for 20 million in committed capital generally. That doesn't need to be just for our program. We're just looking to see that someone has entrusted you as an originator with $20 million to, not entrusted, but has committed 20 million for financing activities. And we're looking for at least 50 transactions or 50 million in transactions funded. And we are open to feedback on these requirements. A couple other things we're looking for feedback on. We're looking for feedback on whether the FDCs or Financial Development Corporation should be considered financial institutions. Is it a problem to have require a single servicer? Do we need flexibility as financing agreements are sold? And do any of the finance companies foresee any concerns with the acknowledgements, representations, and certifications that are asked for in the regulations? So it is 11 o'clock. We are, we are only 4 minutes behind. That's so exciting. So I'm going to pause now to see if anybody wants to comment or ask questions on the finance company. You had a hand go up and then go down.
And we had one question come in from Randy Cherwin, who asks, are savings-based service agreements off-balance sheet agreements? How do they accept payment for energy savings?
I'm going to actually hold on that because I'm going to get to the products in the next section. All right, if anybody, we've got a question in the room and then we'll go to the phones.
Michael Day with Train Ingersoll Rand. Leasing agreements often front load their interest payments, and the principal is paid relatively late over the term of it, whereas traditional finance, it's a straight line amortization. How is CAEATFA going to look at, if it's 90% of the outstanding principal, how are you going to equitably deal with ones that have straight line depreciation under a loan and under a lease where the interest is more front loaded?
So we are, so I think we'll get into this a little bit more when we look at the product definitions, but I think the short answer is that we are not going to have pure product parity when it comes to an institution's decision on how they amortize payments.
Okay.
I think that what we have found in looking at the industry is that loans and leases are actually quite similar. Where I think it comes into play is with the service agreements, where some of the, the service agreement providers like to say there is no interest to the customer. But the truth is that they have a cost of capital that they've had to, borrow funds in order to do that initial installation. And the customer does have some financing charges passed on to them. And how they apply those payments over time, my guess is there's variety in the industry, and we are electing not to police that. So we will have something close to something that is reasonably achievable in terms of product parity, but we will not pretend to have it pure.
Thank you.
We got one more online. Josh Lamb is asking, I don't understand what is meant by contribution rate. Who is paying this and to whom?
So the contribution rate is, let me go back to that slide. The contribution rate is, this is CAEATFA using the ratepayer fund. So we have a $14 million budget right now. There are $14 million in IOU ratepayer funds allocated to this small business program. If we spend it, we can access more from our residential program where we are overfunded. But we are starting with this budget of 14 million that CAEATFA is structuring as this loss reserve. And the contribution rate has to do with, for every enrolled financing agreement, what is the credit enhancement that lender or lease provider is going to receive. And so it's going to be 20% of the first 50,000 and 5% on up to $1 million, because we've talked about $1 million being claim eligible. Okay, I'm going to keep moving then, not seeing any other questions, but feel free to raise your hand and we will unmute you. And if you want to give us feedback. All right, so we'll go now into the products and we'll answer Jeff Guild's question or someone's question. Okay, so as I mentioned, a goal is to support a diversity of financing products. And I do want to say that for our definitions, we're really considering a lease and an efficiency financing agreement to fall under the same definition. Traditionally, one, the title transfers at the beginning of the term, and the other, it's at the end. So there's a big distinction in the industry. Both qualify under our program. I just want to reassure anyone who works with EFAs that your product is in. So one big change that we made from the April design, actually it's a small change from the April design, was to separate out what we are calling service agreements and savings-based payment agreements. So putting the loans and leases aside, there are finance companies out there advertising to customers these service agreements where the customer does not necessarily take title to the equipment. And these are often billed as off-balance sheet agreements, or their technology subscriptions. CAEATFA is not taking an opinion as to whether they're on or off balance sheet because we are not tax lawyers. And there are going to be a lot of different opinions on whether something is truly off balance sheet or whether it is a mandate to repay. But we understand that these service agreements present a lot of value to small business owners, because if you can pay someone a small fee every month and they're going to come in and make sure your lights and your HVAC and everything's running, well, great, because small business owners don't want to worry about it. So we want to support the inclusion of these products in our program. And so what we have done is we've distinguished a service agreement from a savings-based payment agreement. A savings agreement has regular ongoing service and maintenance of measures. There's not a title transfer, and there's a guarantee of functionality of the measures, or there's a guarantee of energy savings, but this is probably going to be a fixed amount per month that is set up with the customer. The savings-based payment agreement is really a type of service agreement where we're distinguishing here, but it's one where the customer shares in the upside from the savings and is cash flow positive. So if the savings aren't realized, the customer doesn't bear the risk. And this can come either from a guarantee or a payment structure that is actually based on savings. And we understand there are some savings-based payment agreement models out there where there is no defined term, because the customer will just pay until they've, the savings agreement will just continue until the customer's recouped or repaid that initial installation cost. And we want to allow that model in there too. We think that being cash flow positive right out of the bat for a customer is a fantastic option. And there are finance companies that we have been talking to that have now been able to offer these types of agreements for projects as small as 200,000, or even in some cases 100,000, which was not really heard of in the industry even 5 years ago. Okay, next I'm going to go on to the product requirements. And our product requirements are pretty minimal. The most significant one for the finance companies is disclosure. We want the customer to either get to know what their annual percentage rate is going to be, inclusive of fees or advance payments, or the total cost of the project comprised of monthly payments times number of months plus fees. This is, again, we're looking for some product parity. We want to make sure if it's a service agreement and the customer is being told, oh, there's no interest, there's no financing here, it's just a service agreement, that they really understand what they're paying for that entire project, because they really are paying for that company's cost of capital. And we still think it might be a great deal for them. We think they should just know what the bottom line is. These disclosure requirements were changed based on industry feedback. So I'd be very curious from the finance companies that are on the line to give us feedback on whether or not you can do this now and whether we've improved it. We are not capping the interest rate where there is one. However, as part of that application process to the program, the finance entity needs to demonstrate what the benefits are to customers in exchange for receiving the credit enhancement. And sometimes this is going to be a reduced rate. We understand sometimes it's not, depending on that company's model. Term length, no restriction. The funds are claim eligible for 10 years. No open-ended lines of credit. These need to be termed, or at least have a amortized to zero if there's not a defined term. Financing minimum, there's none. And then you already know the maximum. The credit enhancement stops at $1 million, but will go up to $5 million. We are going to permit refinances, and refinances if the financing agreement is enrolled with the program of 90 days of project completion, because we want to allow construction financing to be taken out with one of our financing through our program. We just want to be careful. The 90 days is really to make sure we don't have a project that's been done 5 years ago now enrolling in the program, because that would be free ridership. So tell us if this 90 days makes sense, if it's enough. Fees need to be disclosed to us and to the customer. They need to be reasonable and in line with industry standards, but we're not going to regulate them. Progress payments to contractors are permitted. We are not going to require them because that's a private capital provider decision, but we know that that's a biggie for contractors. Collateral, we are requiring a security interest in financed amounts greater than $50,000. We are not regulating what that security interest needs to be, other than it cannot be real property with the exception of a UCC1 fixture filing. And then personal guarantees are not required. They are permitted, although you'll see when we get to the customer underwriting, there are some cases in which they are actually, they can be an option to meet a requirement. So we want to know if these updated product definitions work for the industry, and does the updated disclosure requirement provide parity across product types, and is it doable for your company? I'm going to go through the customer requirements, and I'm going to pause again. I think we did have one question about the net worth requirement. And just to clarify, the net worth requirement for the originator, servicer, and underwriter is 1 million with an M. Okay. So customers. Okay. So who's eligible? And thanks for bearing with me. I know this is a long webinar. All right, so the customer must receive their gas or electricity from one of the 4 utilities. In terms of the size requirement, we have updated and tried to streamline this. So the CPUC guidance decision mentioned that the small business needed to meet the SBA size standards based on, and they base them on these NAICS industry codes for the business's industry. And in talking to the finance companies, we found that most are not looking at the particular NAICS revenue or customer employee cap for each industry. That's kind of burdensome. So what we've done is we've created 2 kind of fast tracks for a customer to qualify, and then we're leaving that SBA standard in there as an option. So if a customer has less than 100 employees, they're a small business. If a customer has annual revenues less than 15 million, they are a small business for our program. We think that takes care of maybe 75% of the businesses that would want, and nonprofits that would want to use our program. However, there are some industries where that SBA standard gets us a little more wiggle room that we think are going to be attractive industries for this program, like grocery. And under the SBA standards, a grocery customer can actually have annual revenue of 37.5 million. So the finance company has the option of utilizing the SBA size standards if they want to qualify someone who can't fit in through the easy ways, or they could just go with the easy and streamlined if they want to be easy and streamlined. And that 100 or fewer and 15 million, that's based on a California Department of General Services kind of small business designation. So we didn't just pull that out of thin air. There's a little bit of precedent for it. These can be owners or tenants. They can, and then there's some credit standards. We do have a question coming in about cannabis related industries. Are they eligible if they meet the other requirements? The short answer is we're working on that. We would like them to be, because we know they don't have access to federal funds. If a finance company is willing to underwrite them and make that financing, but we are still working on making sure that that's something we can do. So in the current regulations as they stand, they are eligible, and we are working on that right now. Okay, so let's talk about the underwriting. I mentioned that we had streamlined this in one of those very first slides. So we're trying to balance allowing finance companies to follow their own underwriting standards with the need to have some guide rails in place to protect the ratepayer funds. Now remember, the finance companies are only going to get to claim 90% of a charge-off, so they have skin in the game on every single every single deal. I just say that to reassure the policy types on the call who may want to see these stricter, but we've really loosened these up. So for companies borrowing less than $350,000, and remember that $350,000, that's that amount that any project that has measures on our pre-approved list disqualifies. So on the underwriting side, we want to see a credit check using a standard industry credit scoring service, or I believe utility bill pay history is an option, since that's something the commission would like to test. We're not even saying what the credit score needs to be. We're just saying you have to do it, and please tell us what it was. And then one of the following three requirements: either there's a positive operating profit or taxable income for the last 2 years, or the customer's been in business at least 5 years, or they provide a personal guarantee. And we think from talking with the finance companies that if we believe that with those options, you can pretty much make a loan lease or service agreement to those that you would want to with our credit enhancement for that amount. Please tell us if we have gotten it right. For amounts over $350,000, we're looking for the credit check. We're looking to make sure that the business shows a positive operating profit or positive taxable income for at least 2 out of the last 5 years, and that the debt service coverage ratio is greater than 1.1 for 2 out of the last 5 years. So we made those 2 out of the last 5 years based on your feedback after the last workshop. Then my final slide on the financing piece is just that we are looking to make sure that we know that finance companies need to sell or transfer their agreements to replenish funds, and we permit the sale, transfer, assignment of financings, portfolio level or single agreements. We ask that you report that to us, and we will set up those trustee sub-accounts to do so. And then we do have some provisions in the regulations to account for if a finance company were to leave or to choose a new servicer, and how that would work with the program, that are in more details in the regulations. Okay, so I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions or comments about this piece. Let me take the one that's coming in online first, and then we'll take the gentleman in the room. Okay. Actually, these questions are on the savings measures. So Joseph Benson, I'm going to hold your question until we get to the next section. So questions or comments right now about financing?
Michael Day, Train, Ingersoll Rand. Regarding the size, for those that are over 350,000, projects over 350,000, what about a new business? All of your underwriting criteria there appear to be for going concerns, whereas new construction oftentimes will have a lot of opportunity to move from a standard efficiency to a higher efficiency option, that this would presumably incentivize that move and has some good public policy, but I don't think that they'd be eligible as a new concern.
So we need to differentiate between a new business and a new building. So we cannot finance the construction of a new building.
A lot of times this would be tenant improvements,
okay.
A new data center going into a new building. So
just to be really clear, because we're an efficiency
sure.
retrofit program. So I don't believe that our underwriting criteria does preclude a business in its first year of operation. So all that the finance company would need to satisfy here is one of the options under 2. So if the customer provided a personal guarantee, then if they're in their first year of business, that would work for our program.
Okay.
So as long as it works for the finance company.
Sure.
And some of them have told us they do want to be able to, and we actually loosened this because I think before we required maybe a year or 2 in business, and they had some they would want to be able to loan to if they had access to our credit enhancement that would help them. You know, those are risky businesses, right, in their first year of operation. Right. But we think a personal guarantee is appropriate in that first year of business.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, are there any other comments from anybody on the call related to the finance elements that we have covered?
We have one in the room.
Oh, I'm sorry.
To Todd O'Connor with Clear Results, 2 quick questions. You mentioned those customers who are located in investor-owned utilities that are being serviced by investor-owned utilities or CCAs or energy service providers. Legislation was recently passed that increased the amount of gigawatt hours that would open up to the direct access market for commercial and small businesses. So I think this covers it. So energy service providers would be those who provide direct access services to those customers. I just need a clarification on that.
So I'm not sure that I'm going to answer with a caveat because this is not an area of strength for me. I understand that the energy service providers are still using the utilities kind of pipes and wires as delivery systems.
That's true.
And that those customers are still paying the program fees. And so that's why they are included in the program. I don't think I can tell you anything more than, I think, do we have a definition in the regulations for energy service provider?
And I just want to clarify that those customers who want to engage in direct access programs still qualify.
So we have a definition in the regulations of what an energy service provider is. I'm not familiar enough with direct access to say yes or no. Okay. I just don't know. I don't know enough. Thank you. Okay, so we will take a look at that afterwards.
And on with respect to the 4 financial products, you did a great job of discussing. I didn't see any requirements that would require a notification to the customer that no lien is required. I didn't know whether we had any feedback on whether that was important to customers or not, but just based on anecdotal experience, it would seem to me that that is a concern always in the back mind of the customer, and then maybe if no lien is required, then that ought to be a requirement that they tell the customer.
Yeah, so the question, just in case folks can't hear it, is about liens, and it's kind of a marketing question as to customer concerns about liens. So we are actually requiring that the lender or lease provider or service agreement provider take a security interest in amounts over $50,000. It's pretty standard in the industry to put a lien on the equipment.
Right. No, I understand that, but on the property.
On the property itself, right. So so we will, I think that's a marketing kind of effort on our part to explain that this is not real property. This is not property secured financing. I mean, the UCC1 fixture filing gets a little bit complicated in terms of how to explain it to a small business or a residential customer because, you know, a lot, like depending on the type of equipment, if it's freestanding equipment and it's personal property and not real property, then, you know, it's easy. But if it's windows, the lease company is going to put a fixture filing on there, and that is going to cloud the title. So it's still not. We're familiar with this challenge from our residential program, and I think it's a marketing and communications effort that CAEATFA needs to lead and help maybe work with the implementers on the messaging, the project developers, and also the finance companies.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it back to Jonathan, and what we're going to now is talk a little bit about, and we're nearing the end here, but we're going to talk about the project life cycle, and then after we go through that, we will get to the energy savings measures and your specific comments on those.
So based on our experience from the residential program, we really wanted to streamline and make it easy to interface with the program. So we have come up with a web-based interface which allows the various parties involved in a project to submit information to the program that we need in order to enroll the project. So we wanted to get rid of government forms altogether. And this allows the various parties, as you can see, there's a finance company, contractor, and project developer to provide program data to the CHEEF web-based interface. And in some cases, there's a lot of flexibility too. For example, for customer data, it could be the contractor that enters the customer data. It could be a project developer, or it could be the finance company. And the customer themselves does not interface directly with the CHEEF. Instead, they'll get a certification notice to them that they can certify remotely and sign off that the project is complete. This web interface enables easy interaction with the program. As I said, we wanted to get rid of program forms. And there's a lot of automated notifications so that, for example, if there's an energy professional on the project, they can get an email that lets them know, okay, now it's time for you to certify those savings. It can generate program certifications for the customer to sign. Finance companies will get a calculated loss reserve. So they will know what the contribution is based on the inputted data for the project and make their decision on funding based on that. And they will also get an approved product notification once all the key data has been entered. And there will also be a dashboard where finance companies, project developers, and contractors can see all their CHEEF projects. This interface does not replace any real-world communication between the finance company and the contractor, the finance company and the customer, or the contractor and the customer. We're just trying to facilitate the data exchange with the program to make it as simple and easy as possible. This slide provides an illustration of a project lifecycle. This is where all the work that you all are doing independently can be plugged into the CHEEF program so that so it shows the various stages where those where the plugins happen. So you can see the different rows. On the top is a green row for a finance company. The next row we have a combined row for contractor, project developer, and the energy professionals. And there's a blue row for CAEATFA and the yellow row at the bottom for the customer. The customer starts off by choosing a finance company and a contractor and possibly a project developer. The finance company would have the option to pre-approve credit at this point. Then the contractor or possibly the project developer will enter the scope of work into the CHEEF interface. And this could take place in multiple stages if there's multiple contractors. Then, if necessary, a notice will go out to the certified energy manager or the professional engineer that they need to certify those energy savings. After which, that's when we get notification that there is a project that has been submitted to us, and we'll do a check on a few points just to make sure that the project qualifies, and then the UI will provide the estimated loss reserve amount. At that point, the lender can do another credit check if necessary, or if not already done, and that's when installation happens. After that, the various contractors and project developers will certify that their work is complete. The customer certifies that they're satisfied and gives us their disclosures. Then the lender will add the financing data and submit the project data to us within 90 days. At that point, it's up to CAEATFA, and then we enroll the agreement and fund the loss reserve account for the lender.
This next slide shows the monthly reporting requirement for the finance companies, which is pretty straightforward and pretty easy. We're basically just asking you to report on performance data, which you have close at hand. So whether the financing is current or past due or charged off, the current outstanding amount, and this gets back to how do we define the financed amount, any updates to the maturity or contractual end date, payment amount or interest rate, if you sell or transfer the financing, the date and the purchaser's, the name of the purchaser, and then some information about delinquencies and charge-offs, just so we can keep an eye on the portfolio and know kind of what funds are on the hook at any given point. This is a simple Excel report. It's been very easy for the lenders in our residential program. It's one of the simplest parts of the program, but we welcome your comments on it. The specific data points are in the regulations, and we welcome your comments from contractors, finance companies, and project developers on any of the data points in the regulations. We've really tried to balance getting program data with not making this burdensome. There are many people who would love us to collect more data. We are not getting, establishing existing conditions baseline data because we want the program to be streamlined and easy to use. But we do want to make sure that the data we have that we are asking for is data that's easy for folks to give us. Let's see, why don't we pause here and see if there's any questions on any of this engagement with the program and the use of the user interface or reporting or data. And then we'll go on to the measures.
Oh, go ahead.
Todd O'Connor with Clear Result. On page 65, we have the box called Certify Estimated Energy Savings. If a project had already qualified under the PUC for its custom review program and that savings has already been certified by the PUC, does it need to go through a second certification?
The question was, if the PUC had already certified a project's energy savings through their custom program, does it need another certification from the certified energy manager? I don't know that we'd actually considered PUC custom certification.
He's talking about the IOU
Oh,
custom.
the utilities.
Yeah, it's the PUC has a parallel review process for the IOU custom. So I think no. So if something qualifies, if there's an IOU custom notice to proceed or approval letter to the customer, that's good enough. They're done.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question here. Oh, it just disappeared. There was a question here from.
It's been answered now, I think.
Oh, it's been answered? Okay.
I just has to rephrase.
Or rephrase. Vanya Khan, if you want to, maybe we can unmute her and she can ask the question live.
She's raised her hand.
Is she unmuted?
I clicked on mute.
Give it one more click. Vanya, we're working on unmuting you at this. Give us just a minute.
She may need to unmute herself also.
Maybe.
Oh, there.
Oh.
Go ahead, Vanya.
It looks like you're live, Vanya.
All right, Vanya, we're not able to hear anything. So maybe you can rephrase your question in the chat box. I'm getting a note from a attendee that that you guys don't seem to have your own mute or unmute button for yourselves. So maybe we control it all. But Vanya, we show you as unmuted, but we are not able to hear you. So please send us your question or comment again. All right, why don't we move forward to the energy savings measures?
So you want me to pull up the regulations?
Sure.
Okay. There's going to be a brief interval while I stop sharing the slide deck and share the regulations. Okay, now I'll get back to share again. There we go. Share screen and okay, we are now displaying the beginning of the eligible saving measures list. So what are we going to do with this?
So I think what we want to make the point here that maybe we can scroll through it a little bit. It's easier to see in the regulations text that we sent you, but it's also in the back of the slide deck as an appendix. And these measures were put on the list because we believe that these are technologies that have a reasonable, pretty good chance of saving energy in kind of any application. So we're trying to make our pre-approved list as broad as possible. And so we think, regardless of building type or situation, these measures are going to save energy. And so we are interested in folks' feedback. If you believe that a certain technology should be on this list and it's not, and that could be, so I think it keeps going for several pages. So that could be, the DER question that we were just addressing, or it could be a particular technology. Then we would like your comments on that and what should be included in addition to what's here. And if anybody would like to speak to this, I know there's a gentleman on here, Joseph Benson, I know you wanted to talk about a particular technology. If anyone wants to address the energy savings measures, now is the time to do so. And we can unmute you, or you can send us a comment and we will share it. We also encourage you, if you want something, if you believe something should be on this list and it's not, then please send us an email also. That's another way you can give us feedback on that. Or if you believe that, I think we did get some comments earlier on what feedback on a couple of the requirements for some of the specific measures. So we will also take all feedback on the energy savings measure list now through October 19th. Yeah, why don't we go to
Mike Thompson, California Energy Alliance. I haven't had a chance to read through this list, but I didn't see in quick glance monitoring of energy, building energy. Is that on the list by chance?
So the question is monitoring of building energy on this list? And I'm actually going to bring Dan Mellinger in now. I think he's unmuted. Dan, do you want to address the building monitoring question?
Yes, I can address that one quickly, and then I want to make a couple other broad points. We do have energy management systems on the list. We received a couple of comments during the webinar about that particular measure, about how it's more cross-cutting. We have it currently categorized under HVAC, and so that's some good feedback that we'll take into account. We don't specifically have energy metering, like sub-metering or anything like that, if that's what you are intended by the comment. More broadly, a few comments I want to make so that people are oriented to the list. The measure category at the left will sometimes address a technology like HVAC we're seeing here. You also see a few specific customer types like agriculture or food service where the equipment is specific to that end use. The requirements column, the third column, will provide any requirements that are over and above or different than Title 24. So if the requirements field is blank for a particular measure, it means that the measure must minimally meet Title 24. But here where we're looking at some food service measures, the commercial dishwashing equipment needs to be an Energy Star certified piece of equipment. The electric or gas column, second from the right, indicates if that measure is eligible for electric IOU service or gas IOU service. And then finally, the last column on the right is the self-install measure. So this indicates whether or not the measure can be self-installed without the use of a participating contractor. And again, the criteria that we presented earlier talks about how we determine whether or not a measure could be eligible for self-install. And that's chiefly whether or not it can be legally and safely installed without a license, and if the installation by a non-professional is unlikely to affect the performance of the equipment.
Thank you, Dan. There is a comment also here. There's a comment from John Handy saying, I would add high efficiency transformers. They are approved by the CEC for Prop 39 projects. Is there anything that you would like to ask John about regarding high efficiency transformers?
No, it's a good comment. It's a measure I'm familiar with, and we can certainly add it to the list. Thank you.
Okay, and then we've got Joseph Benson. Do you want to speak to the reflective coating? You are I believe you are unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, there you go.
Okay, terrific. Okay, yeah, I had a quick question. Just because if you look on the list currently, you can see Cool Roof. It says must be certified by Cool Roof Rating Council, CRC. Whether it be Title.
Can you identify your affiliation, please?
Yeah, Life Paint Corporation. So we're a manufacturer of elastomeric coatings, heat reflective elastomeric coatings. We work with Pace, worked with Hero in the past. But I see Cool Roof on there, so I feel that the elastomeric coatings, the heat reflective elastomeric coatings, could be something that could be on this list. I don't currently see it on the list, but the fact that I see Cool Roof on there leaves a good opening.
We do have, I'm not specifically familiar with this product or technology, but I'm wondering if you would consider it under the, that it would fall under the radiant barrier measure that we do have on the list.
Radiant barrier. Can you point out where that is?
That's under building envelope.
Building envelope.
Top of your screen there. Second item on the list.
It just says radiant barrier. There's really nothing more to it.
Okay, got it. Okay, well, yeah, it definitely could. It's a heat reflective coating. The whole point is that the temperature inside the home is reduced about 3%. It saves on energy costs for the homeowner. So that probably could fit in that category, correct?
So I think just as we did get a process question here, if participants have a particular technology that you want added, I think this conversation is very helpful. Your comments in the chat box are helpful. I think sending us an email to chief@treasurer.ca.gov or those addresses we showed you, and we'll show you them again, and just saying, here's a technology I think should be included and here's why. Because this is such a black and white part of the regulations, I'd like to get a little bit of those recommendations just to make sure we get everything from this webinar in. I do want to clarify, Joseph, that this list is for our commercial program. So the regulations for our residential program and those measures are totally separate. So that would be that's a separate regulatory process. But this list right here we're looking at is for our commercial program. Likely a lot of these technologies will be available for our multifamily as well. I will get you in one moment.
Okay, thank you. I'll send off an email.
Okay, perfect. Dan, we had a follow-up here just to clarify the energy metering monitoring system. Can you just clarify your answer to that?
Oh, energy management systems are on the ESM list, the pre-qualified list. I'm not sure if there was another question related to that.
Why don't we, so this question is coming from Philip Kopp. I'm gonna, okay, so Philip, I'm gonna promote you as a panelist if you want to address the energy management systems.
It might take him a few seconds to log back in.
Okay, so in the meantime, why don't we go to the question in the room?
Oh, you know, Miriam, I'm now reading his specific question that he is saying metering, and energy metering equipment is not on the list. And we did have a discussion about that early on in the program design and chose to exclude it from this list because energy metering by itself is not, doesn't save any energy. It's not an energy efficiency measure. We certainly acknowledge that energy savings are possible through having more knowledge and information about energy use. And so if people feel strongly about energy metering equipment being eligible, we'd welcome that input and feedback.
Philip, you're unmuted if you want to speak to that.
Hi, everyone. This is Phil Kopp here. So, yeah, I think
where are you from? Who are you?
Oh, sorry. I'm from Connectric Networks down in San Diego. And we're a technology company, and we have an interest in energy metering systems being a principal component of overall energy management strategy, and in particular software. And what we see is a trend in certainly that more software solutions are becoming available to help business energy managers and business managers in general get a handle on their consumption patterns and behaviors, and being able to implement savings measures and programs. And obviously energy metering is an important component of that. So I just wanted to see, looking at how some of these softwares work, they're sold as a service maybe. And then there's an energy metering component that's actual physical hardware. So there is an install cost to that. There is a professional contracting labor component to that. But the actual energy service sort of being performed is usually based on a software subscription. So I was just kind of wondering, how that kind of fits into this general EMS category, and then maybe what portion of that would be considered under the credit enhancement. If that makes sense.
Dan, did you want to respond to that first? Because I had a comment. Okay, this is Jonathan. Hi, Phil. One of the challenges that we had, because I was one of the people who was thinking that this could be a valuable addition, but at the same time, one of the challenges that we had is how do we limit the amount that a customer is spending on a non-energy saving measure if they're investing in an expensive system, because that is kind of a risk of our program is not realizing energy savings.
And I put Philip back as an attendee, so
okay.
So he's not able to respond to us, but we can continue the dialogue. Let's take I think we have this question in the room, then I'm going to go to the line, and we'll go back to the room.
Thank you, Todd O'Connor with Clear Result. My question also is for your consultant, because he raised Prop 39, and it gets to the earlier question I raised about nonprofits and faith-based organizations, and they usually have schools. So my question is, and that is the only way those schools can participate in any kind of financing for energy efficiency, because they are excluded from Prop 39. Prop 39 only applies to public schools, charter schools, and community colleges. So my focus is on the schools that are run by faith-based organizations, and that they should be able to, in a sense, level the playing field with the other schools in terms of getting financing for energy efficiency measures. So very simply, anything that qualifies under Prop 39 could that also would be eligible for these faith-based organizations and nonprofits.
So I think you've got two questions here. I think the first one is, and this is back to your earlier question on nonprofits. Does a nonprofit school, a faith-based private nonprofit school, qualify as a customer under this program? I believe the answer is yes, but I'd just like to check, because we have a separate program for public entities, but that would not be a public entity. I think the second part is, should any measure that qualifies under Prop 39 qualify for this program? I think we need to look at that, because again, we've got different sources of funds. So Prop 39 being taxpayer funds or being public funds, and this being utility ratepayer funds. So I think it's a good suggestion, but I don't know if Prop 39 includes things like water efficiency, which we actually can't do. It can't credit enhance.
Not less than. I can see, excuse me, Todd O'Connor will close out. I can see saying a minimum qualifying, that sets a minimum requirement, but if you find more technologies that qualify, obviously Prop 39 should not be a bar. It's just another way, another illustrative way of saying what's qualifying.
Thank you for that feedback. That's good for us to take into consideration. I'm going to go to one question here from the line, and then we'll go to the gentleman in the room, Eric. For any of the measures listed, do we need to be concerned with any other baseline than the actual pre-project conditions? So from CAEATFA's perspective for this program, we are not focusing on the baseline. There is an an evaluation, measurement, and verification, an EM&V team. There's an EM&V contract that the Public Utility Commission has awarded to Opinion Dynamics Corporation, who will be doing the evaluation of this pilot program and figuring out how much we have saved in terms of energy savings. And they will be with the PUC determining, what is net to gross, and whether or not there's a code baseline in some buildings, or whether we have an existing conditions baseline and all that. So we have taken and this is on a background slide, actually. We're assuming that energy savings are going to be derived through using a normalized metered energy consumption type model. And so we are not asking anyone to give us information on program baseline conditions. Those of you who are working with utility programs, where this is relevant for your utility program, where your project must meet the utilities standard related to that, then that all applies. But for the financing piece, we're not adding anything there. Let's go to Eric Taylor. Can you introduce yourself again, please?
Okay. Eric Taylor, California Energy Alliance. want to reiterate the importance of monitoring and including it into the finance component. And the main reason is that there's a major growing trend on the fact that benchmarking a building down at the circuit level is extremely important, especially with HVAC, so that the measures that the banks are financing, it's all about measuring the runtime of an HVAC system and reducing that runtime. And without the measurement component, it's almost impossible to do it over time. And so the idea behind benchmarking and doing an engineering report, there's a big struggle in the marketplace right now, convincing the building owners that this is a very important issue. And when an engineering report is plopped in front of a customer, they don't know what to do with it. But when monitoring is there and they're able to see it in real time and see where the improvements can be made, a lot of companies are adding these energy efficiency services such as lighting as a service, HVAC as a service. Without adding that component, it's impossible to basically validate and mitigate the risk of financing those assets.
Great, thank you for that feedback. Dan, is there anything that you want to say in response or any clarifications there? I'm attempting to unmute you.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Oh, sorry. I tried to chime in earlier when Jonathan asked, and I didn't realize I inadvertently muted myself. Just a broad comment that we've received a number of questions and comments through both the chat and, of course, audio. And I think we will take a look at this broader category of energy management, and perhaps it should be expanded to energy monitoring. And I will say, however, that the absence of a measure on the ESM list doesn't preclude it from the program. There are still other eligibility pathways or methods. And so, for example, using a CEM or PE, if a particular measure like energy monitoring could be documented to save a certain amount of energy, it can be accepted through the program. So we'll certainly consider broadening or expanding that definition of energy management systems on the ESM list, but also keep in mind there's another method.
Yeah, thank you for that point. And Dan, to that point, we have a follow-up here from Jeff Guild on metering as to whether it would be claim eligible under the legally and practically required. So if folks remember back to the slides, that anything that's legally and practically required to install a particular measure, we tend to think about asbestos removal as an example. We consider that claim eligible, included in that $1 million that the lender will get the credit enhancement. Would metering be considered legally and practical, Dan? I'm not sure.
The way we've considered legal and practical, no, it wouldn't be. But I think we can consider broadening that definition of EMS, energy management systems.
And then again, if something doesn't qualify through any of our pathways, the customer can always include, there's that 30% of claim eligible financing can be what we call a non-ESM, a non-energy saving measure. So even if we don't consider it an energy saving measure, but it's important to the customer, the lender can still, or finance provider can still get the credit enhancement for it. All right, I think we had 2 more questions left in the room.
Mike Thompson, California Energy Alliance. 2 things, just one last word on monitoring. You can spend a lot of money, for instance, on an HVAC system, tuning it up, getting it fixed, but unless you monitor it, you have no idea how long that investment is good for. The second thing, question on the energy saving measures, how about demand response equipment, the installation of demand response equipment?
So demand response is eligible under the program. We do consider it an energy savings measure. I don't think you see it here other than maybe a responsive thermostat, because we've had It doesn't seem like there's a lot of demand response on a prescriptive list. However, using that either utility custom pathway approval method or the professional engineer or certified energy manager saying that it will save energy, or I suppose shift energy. Maybe we need to think about having a CEM or PE certification about load shifting as part of what gets certified through that pathway. I'm not sure. I've now gone beyond my technical expertise. So Dan, if you want to jump in here, you are welcome.
Yeah, and the ESM list is constrained to measures that are equipment, and many of the demand response approaches don't involve equipment. And so we discussed demand response in that context earlier and decided not to include it on the list. But when there are specific pieces of equipment that are affiliated or associated with demand response, I think it's reasonable for us to include it. And so that's certainly an area where we'd welcome input.
Okay, thank you. We had a question from Vanya. I'm not sure if you're still on the line. Vanya, if you're still on the line, if you can raise your hand again so we can locate you and unmute you. I was just waiting till we got through the ESM questions.
Maybe while we're, maybe.
In the interim, okay, so this will be our last ESM piece of feedback, and then we're gonna show you how to give us more feedback before we hit 12 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. This is Eric Taylor from the California Energy Alliance again. I wanted to, I don't want to belabor the monitoring, but I wanted the committee here to recognize another growing trend, which is embedded EM&V, which is basically demand response, adaptive controllers. In other words, when a demand response event is sent and you don't turn off fan controllers, you lower the speed of the fan controller, there's an energy savings that again has to be measured during that period of time. And then as well as proving to the customer, if you're selling service agreements on energy savings, for example, as HVAC as a service, then without being able to show the customer and integrating these services like a control system, for example, if monitoring was included, just as the wording that monitoring is included, so the customer isn't confused, why do I even need that? And then that sales barrier is put there. And then especially during a demand response event, if it becomes a real-time automated demand response and we get down to the level of being able to measure that event in minutes and 15 seconds, intervals and these types of things.
So question, because we're hearing so much about the importance of the monitoring and the metering, and I apologize for not, I'm the finance person, I apologize for not knowing the difference between monitoring and metering. Can you help me understand what size projects are you talking about?
At any size project.
But realistically, when is someone going to install this type of technology? I mean, I'm assuming they're not doing it for a $25,000 HVAC lease. So just help me understand the context of what size of projects.
No, it's going down to the level of a residential air conditioning system.
Okay.
Building it into a service agreement to where the energy savings is paying for the service agreement, to projects as big as the Hilton Village in Hawaii.
Okay, thank you.
I've seen
That's
major
helpful.
projects from small to big, and air conditioner is an air conditioner, runtime's runtime.
Okay, and Philip Kopp has chimed in saying below 10,000. Okay, so thank you. We hear you on the monitoring, we hear you on the metering. We will come up, I will come up to speed on the difference, and our consultant already is there and understands it, so we're good. Jonathan, can we go back to the slide deck?
She is now no longer here.
Oh, he did. Okay, great. Actually, then I think Kevin, if you are still there, if he is able to respond.
I saw him in the chat.
I asked him. Did
Oh.
he respond?
No, I didn't see a response.
Okay, then never mind. Let's we'll just go to our feedback slides. Okay.
Okay, so let's see. Share screen. This thing.
All right, we appreciate everyone's attention. We really appreciate everyone's engagement, both in this round and in previous rounds. We're good. I'm seeing your
You're seeing,
your slides.
okay, so we had an engagement slide.
Yeah, so I just want to summarize here. We've got sort of a summary of questions for feedback. Again, we are happy to take any feedback, whether or not we've asked a question. We still encourage you to comment on any provision of the regulations. We suggest that you, if you're going to comment, that you comment on the regulation text beyond the specific slides, just because that's where we get into the nitty gritty. And remember, you can see what part of the regulations any slide is talking about. Or if you're commenting on the ESM list, you can just say I'm commenting on the ESM list, and that's fine. So here are the addresses. And again, this should be in everyone's inbox or spam box. If it wasn't in your inbox, this deck with these addresses. Here's where you're going to send your comments to, or you can call us, or you can email us and tell us you want to talk to us more. We'd be happy to do so, but we want to do it within the next 10 days. We really want to get your comments in by the 19th because we are planning to take these regulations to our board in November and to the Office of Administrative Law in December. And then you've got an appendix with some information on the other pilot programs, as well as a claim example for the finance companies on here, and then another copy of the ESM list in its current form. So I'll leave this on the comment slide, and we are at 12 p.m. exactly, so we are going to end the webinar. Thank you very much. We really appreciate everyone's engagement and attention today.
Yes, thank you all, and we look forward to your future feedback.
Thank you.
I have never seen this happen before, ever.
Darren, are we?
Did you?